and welcome to the Vital Masculinity podcast. I am your host, Stephen Sloyer, and I'm here with my co-host, Brian Murphy. How you doing, Brian?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. So for you listeners out there, I am sure the first question that you guys have is, what is vital masculinity? Who are these men? Why are we talking to you? And what makes us qualified to talk to you about vital masculinity? There's a lot behind that question. Brian, I'm sure you would agree with me that masculinity gets a bad rap these days. It's very hard to define what it is, and there's a lot of confusion about what it means, right?
Right. Yeah. So the reason we came up with the name Vital Masculinity is because if you're listening to kind of the cultural conversation that's going on today, you hear a lot of this talk of toxic masculinity, and it almost assumes that if you act like a man, like as people traditionally think of how men act, then there's somehow something toxic about that. And so we want to kind of focus on, well, what's good about being a man?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot that's good about being a man, in the same way there's a lot that's good about being a woman. And if you think that there's good things about being a man, it doesn't mean you hate women. And if you think that there's good things about being a woman, it doesn't make you a feminist in the way that that's defined. But there's definitely exactly what you said. There's a lot that is good about being a man, and there always has been. Because I definitely believe, and I'm sure you would agree with me, Brian, that we complement each other, male and female, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at kind of the response today and the way people think about masculinity and femininity, and I think there is a point to there certainly are toxic things, but I don't think it's built into what it means to be a man. It's more so distortions of masculinity, if you will, where we take this macho mindset or the strong silent type or whatever it might be, and kind of you look at that and you say, oh, that's you watch TV shows and movies, and that's kind of all we see, right?
Yeah, we have our own, I think, archetypes. We have our own visions of what it means to be a man, and a lot of men see that and they say that's what it is. And they'll pick one character in a movie or on TV, or they'll pick an athlete, or they'll pick someone even from like a book, and they'll say that is the person that I want to be. But you and I, we believe, as along with so many people from the past, so many people that have been great thinkers, great leaders, great philosophers, and these people believe that being a good man needs a foundation, and that foundation is virtue, and that is what we're here to talk to you guys about.
Right. Who would you say were some people that you kind of looked up to, maybe when you were younger, before you had this idea of virtue, of what it meant to be a
Oof,
man?
man, uh, I was really big into football, so I would say athletes. Your Tom Brady's, your Peyton Manning's, Joe Namath. I'm a Jets fan, unfortunately. um, and I think my dad too. My dad was a bodybuilder. So, but when you talk about, when you look at those two archetypes, I'm sure this is what you're getting at. Like they're very not complete. They're very one sided in a sense.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, everyone that you mentioned is kind of, they're modern people. They're, maybe
Hmm.
popular at the time. So, and it's kind of a very narrow focus of, we're just looking at maybe in the past, 50 years, specific examples of men. And I'm sure there's plenty of good men that you can look at in this time period. But if we look throughout history, there's an even broader idea of what it means to be a man.
Absolutely. And that's really, I think, what's important. It's very easy to, a good example is music. It's very easy to look at the popular music of today, your Taylor Swift's, and I actually don't know anyone else in popular music, and compare, if you compare her music to, say, like Beethoven or Bach, and you can say, okay, 500 years from now, who's going to be around? And there is something that's transcendent about the music of the Bachs, the music of the Rachmaninoffs, the music of the uh, you know,
Guns N'
all these
Roses.
other people. Yeah, there you go. Right, right, right. But Taylor Swift, that sounds good. but you listen to it, your brain floods with the dopamine that the music was really, let's be honest, designed to provide, and then 5 days later, after the song's been stuck in your head, you probably forget about it. And that's why you see
Absolutely.
so many, yeah, you see so many pop artists churning out album after album. And there's it's not really art. I shouldn't use that word artist. And actually tying this back to what I was talking about, masculinity, there's a lot of people nowadays, as we said, that talk about masculinity as if it's something bad. And in many ways, in many respects, that is just another popular fad. If you
Right.
look all throughout history, the 19th century, the 15th century, the 12th century, going back to Greek and Roman times, and even before that, there's so many great thinkers that not only say why being a man is good, but really explain how you get to become a good man.
Right. It's
And
interesting
really,
too because I think that's kind of in some ways what modern people, these radical feminists or whoever it might be, are railing against is toxic masculinity. They kind of look,
mhm,
in some ways, they look back at men of history, great men of history who've done, they haven't been perfect men. They've done good things
sure.
and maybe they've done some bad things. Certainly they have. And, but the focus seems to be entirely on the bad things that they've done and saying, okay, we have to reject these people because, for whatever reason. And I guess in some sense, we don't want to accept like, people who obviously are not good role models, but at the same time, like even
Right.
the best of role models are not perfect human beings.
But that does not mean that we need to not strive for that, right? It doesn't mean we're hopeless and we're eternally damned and all that, right?
Right, right. But I think that's the point too, is that we look at these people and they're not perfect people, but they have good qualities to them, and those are the good qualities that we want to focus on. We
Absolutely.
want to say, okay, these are the best things about these people, and we want to follow those virtues in these people.
Yeah. And I think the reason, because people don't talk about virtue, people don't really talk about goodness nowadays, because I think a lot of the conversation about what it means to be a man is with success or efficiency or productivity
Right.
or words like that, right? I'm sure because you're in
Or
tech,
whatever
Brian,
skills
you
you
see that a
have.
lot.
Yeah.
It's very hard skill based, right? And
Exactly.
and because of that, oh, crap, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in the class.
So you think about you go through an interview like so. I just got a job recently, actually,
Sure.
and you list all your experience there, and then you list all the skills you have. But I mean, when it comes down to it, like they've filtered through all those things, and they bring you in for an interview, and they really want to figure out what type of person you are. Like maybe they know you have the skills. They want to maybe ask some questions about that, but they really want to see, are you a good fit for this organization? And that kind of like shows us that it's not just about the skills, but it's about the foundation, the person, the type of person and the character they have that kind of drives those skills. So the skills are kind of the surface level. They're important, but there's something at the foundation that's far more important.
Right. And going back now that I remember my thought. So the reason why we put these foundation in place isn't just for ourselves. It isn't so we can achieve some sort of reward. I mean, yeah, if you're a more patient man, if you're a more prudent man or just man, you may get a pay raise because I don't know, maybe you were a awful person before and now you're more agreeable with your boss. But the reason why we do this isn't so that we can get some reward. It isn't that we can meet some metric, some target measure of success, but it's because that we are built for community. And when we become good, virtuous men, that means that we can be leaders in our community and we can lead them to places that can really foster a sense of beauty, a sense of truth, and a sense of openness and honesty. And we can produce good people as well.
Right. We want to focus on not just the surface level, but we want to actually see the man transformed from the inside to actually develop these good habits, these what we call virtues, so that they can actually take these skills out into the world and actually make a difference in their families, in their communities, in forming a brotherhood. And I think when we look at the world we live in, we see, the communities that we live in are very much decayed from what happened, what was around maybe even a generation ago. Where
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about like maybe going in New York City or even where I live in Rochester, which is a much smaller city. You walk around and sometimes people won't even look at you, and maybe you don't even know your neighbors. So we've kind of been
Yeah.
fragmented and become very individualistic. And I think
Right.
we really need to form a community where we can actually grow and build up and encourage one another.
Absolutely. And that really is the goal of this podcast, of this project of vital masculinity. We want to start with building virtuous men. And I shouldn't even say building, because at the end of the day, Brian, you would agree with this. We're not here trying to tell you what to do. We're not here trying to, be a teacher and these are lectures for you to listen to. Really, we're on the same journey as you guys are. I mean, Brian, you and I have been looking and researching and reading and discussing and helping each other and mentoring each other being better men for years, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because you watch TV shows, you watch movies, you watch sports, and you say, what kind of man am I supposed to be? And there's all these ideas out there, but it's quite frankly, there's too many ideas out there, and it's very
Yeah.
confusing.
Yeah. This
Um,
is why we need to go back to the basics, to the foundation that the people, our forefathers, our ancestors have laid out for us.
yeah. What do you think the average man? How clear of a picture do you think the average man has of what it means to be a man?
Oof. I'm going to turn that on you, and I'm going to say, how many average men do you think actually think about that question? Because I mean, I think that answers it. I don't think many men do. I think many men nowadays, people that are my age, so mid 20s, you probably, you know, grow up, go to public school, go to college because that's what everyone's told to do, and you get a job, and you really much specialize in a field. And yeah, you may get married, you may have a family, but at the end of the day, I think the thing that your life revolves around is a job. And your success or your failure rate, at least in your mind, is based on, are you providing? Which is a good thing, but are you meeting these metrics? Are you good at your job? And while that's a good thing, it's not the only thing. It's
Yeah,
not the foundation,
yeah,
right?
that's true, and I think in some ways, and probably for a lot of men, it's not even just about the job, but it's we've kind of like made it even more so about like what type of things do we consume? Like, are you a Windows or a Mac person?
Oh,
Do you
absolutely.
listen to this band? Do you play this sport? This is who I am. I do these things.
Mhm.
I buy these things. I use these devices, and it's like I
Yeah.
am what I consume. Like as they say, you are what you eat.
It's and that definitely contributes to the fragmentation. I mean, if you're too busy staring down into your Apple iPhone as you walk down the street, you're not going to be looking up and actually getting to know the people that live on your street.
Right, and I think that comes back to the idea of virtue. We we if you look at America, one of the things that is really important to us is freedom. Like you always hear people talking about freedom. It's the land of the free and the home of the brave. And I think we have this kind of distorted idea of what it means to be free. Well, maybe
Mhm.
not distorted, but incomplete. We look at freedom as the freedom from constraint, the freedom from, someone's not stopping us from doing this. But in reality, if in the virtuous way of looking at things, freedom is actually the ability to do something. The so one example I like to use is maybe you sit down to a piano, and I ask you, can you play Mozart or some famous composers a really difficult and complicated piece on the piano? And if you've never learned piano, you might be free to try to do that, but you're not free to actually play it in the sense that you can actually sit down and have the freedom to actually play the actual music.
Right, right. And that's a very good idea. And that's also important because as Americans, the idea of freedom I think is so ingrained in our even our daily lives that it's something to really think about. And because of that, going really back to virtue, virtue is something that, again, as we said, we're not perfect with. Brian and I are somewhere between Adolf Hitler and Mother Teresa. um, we've been on this journey for many years, but we know many people have been on it for a lot longer. And we actually want to hear from you. If you listen to this podcast and you say, hey, I know more than you,
Absolutely.
we want to connect. Like, we want to communicate because if we don't know the answer, we want to figure things out. And if you don't know the answer, if you have no idea what virtue is, if you never read Plato or Aristotle or even thought about it, then we want you to connect as well. Because moving beyond from our first goal of building virtuous men gets us to the second goal, which is about building brotherhood. And Brian, I know you have a lot of very good brotherhoods, particularly via like your churches and stuff and your other fellowships. And do you want to address why that's important in this day and age?
Yeah, I think you look at, I mean, all the confusion. You look at our political climate, and there's a lot of division, and people can feel very isolated, confused, angry.
Mhm.
And in that type of atmosphere, it's hard to really grow as a man, to impact your community, to be involved with your community. And just finding other men that actually share a common goal, a common vision, that want to encourage each other is such important thing to have in your life, to for your own benefit and for the benefit of those around you.
Yeah, it really is because we don't live in a bubble. We can't get better in a bubble. Yeah, you can read about these things, but I think you and I would both agree that most of our growth over these past few years in terms of what it means to be a man, in terms of virtues and virtuous living, and even in other things, more practical hard skills have been in the conversations that we've had, right?
Exactly. And I'm really looking forward to having more conversations on this podcast with other men who will be listening to this. Hopefully, we'll get to meet them at some point and
Absolutely.
really build a brotherhood and affect our own families, ourselves, and our communities. And I think we can do it. Like Steven said, we haven't have it we don't have it all figured out, but I think we look around and we see what else is out there, and there's a lot of good stuff with art of manliness, order of man, building all these skills and such. And I think they're doing a lot of really good work. But I feel like there's something missing there. There's a there's a focus, um, with all these
Internal
different.
component, really,
Right,
that's
right.
missing.
Yeah, we're missing the foundation of the virtues, and kind of tying that into a tradition, so to speak. And
Right.
we're missing the clarity that comes with that. We
The
look at all the different.
completeness.
Right, right. You look at all the skills that they have, they have a lot of great stuff on their sites, and I'm not knocking them at all. I'm would recommend going and check them out. But with
Please
all
do.
of the different things that are on there, there's just so much to sort through that it kind of can be overwhelming.
Right. Absolutely. And, everyone has to start somewhere because we live in this day and age that we really have to teach ourselves. I mean, going to those sites is very important. I think Brett McKay, Brian Mickler, and all the other people, all the other men that really put themselves out there into the sphere via podcasts, via other material, these people are doing a great service because they're really acting as the way a lot of our fathers needed to act, a lot of our uncles, a lot of our brothers, and they're really providing that education in masculinity that we never had. And really, this last step, this last goal that we have is helping you get up to that level. We want you guys, we want to journey with you guys. We want to help you guys reach the level where you can be the mentors, where you can be the leaders in your community, and not just someone that helps a brother along, but you can actually give advice and feel sound in that advice, that you can be a good example to people in your community, and not just to men, but to the people you work with, to your family, because that's important as well. We're not just being a good example so that we look good. We're not just being a good example so that we get a pay raise. We're setting a good example and we're living a good, virtuous life, because that's what we believe we're called to do. And I think all of our forefathers would agree with that.
Absolutely. And I just want to reiterate the point that, we don't have it all figured out, but I think like the reason we're here is because we saw a need. We had a desire, and we're kind of on this mission, and we're hoping that we can kind of draw everyone together, all of our listeners, and hopefully even collaborate with, Art of Manliness, Order of Man, and other groups as well.
Right.
To figure this out, to get a clearer picture of what it means to be a man, and more in particular, what it means to be a virtuous man, a man of character.
Absolutely. I mean, you could almost say this is our vocation. I think you and I have both discussed that in many ways we're called, at least right now, to be having this conversation with you guys. And that is what it is. It's a conversation. We want you guys to reach out to us, whether that's on social media, whether it's on our website, vitalmasculinity.org, O-R-G, or whether that is via email or via wherever you find this podcast, because these conversations will not only benefit you, we think they'll benefit us. And that's important because we need all the help we can get sometimes too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look forward to communicating with anyone that's interested in this mission.
Right. We're here for you guys in the same way that, we hope you avail yourselves to the opportunity. So the last question is, what's next? And these next couple of podcast episodes, Brian and I are really going to get to the heart of what we mean when we say virtue. Virtue is not something that's very monolithic. It's not just you become a virtuous person and that's like flipping a switch. It's really assimilating a couple of different virtues and mastering them into your being and really living that virtuous self, not just doing virtuous things, but actually living in a virtuous way. And the best place to start, and I think most people would agree, is with the 4 cardinal virtues. That's prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude. And so that's what we're going to be talking about the next couple of episodes. And it's important for us to not just sit here, as we mentioned, and lecture you guys. So you don't need to take out pens and paper unless you really want to take notes. But we really want to make it practical. We want to not just tell you what these 4 virtues are, but we want to expand and say, how can you start to implement things and become more just, become more prudent?
Right.
So that's all for this introductory episode to the Vital Masculinity podcast. Please visit us at vitalmasculinity.org. Drop us a line. You can find all of our contact information there. We are also on Facebook. And we look forward to connecting with you, and we look forward to seeing you back with episode 2.